Welcome to the Know Your Ship podcast, presented by eHub. I'm your host, Frank Dolce.
We've certainly, over the last 12 months, refined our understanding of who our target customer is, how to service them, and that's probably what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is like less of the startups, more, kind of $5 to $100 million brands. There are brands bigger than that we work with. There are brands smaller than that. But as far as like if you say who's the target, and even 2 million. Once a brand has enough momentum, they have sales, they have cash flow, they're a good candidate for us to come in and help them optimize.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're pre-revenue and pre-proof and pre-all these things, there are companies that specialize in that, and that's what Kickstarter type level things.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of decided, hey, we're going to really focus on this constituency, especially fast-growing companies. They tend to break a lot of things. And our focus isn't just going to be let us source things. Our focus is going to be how much money can we draw out of your supply chain and give it back to you. And that's money we can draw after our fees. So that's been really good. I mean, it's hard to say no to that sales pitch. It's like, okay, we'll do an audit for free. If we can save you a ton of money, then hire us. If we can, then don't.
Yeah.
But we haven't run into many brands that one way or another we can't come and say, hey, we can save you money, while not sacrificing quality or capacity or the other things that matter. In fact, usually those increase as well. But
So how long have you been in? How long has Shyft been around now?
7 years. Just finished 7 years.
So prior to this, I don't know, realization, were you working with everybody in the sourcing kind of?
Yeah.
Yes.
I would say, when you bootstrap a company, because we've never raised, we've never done anything, we own 100% of it. And there's pros and cons to that. But one of the big pros is that, or one of the big cons, or you could see it either way, is that you are a little bit more reactive to, hey, we have to pay the bills. So, we can't be overly picky about if you're the perfect target.
Mm-hmm.
If you go out and raise money and are a little bit more deliberate and you've kind of beforehand figure out your ICP, and you never figure that out perfectly, but you have a little bit more of a pointed approach. For us, for the first, I would say 4 to 5 years, we would rarely turn something down, unless it was highly technical that we just didn't have the engineers, because we're not an engineering firm. We wouldn't touch those, but just about anything else we would do. And then it started to become, well, let's kind of refine it into categories. And then from there, over this last 12 months, we've even those categories we've refined further.
Okay.
And it's like, these are the 3 or 4 categories, and they're still quite broad. They're big categories like beauty and wellness.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be everything from a supplement to a cream to a fragrance.
Mm-hmm.
Soft goods, that could be anything from a hammock to a backpack to a whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But they share commonality in the technical skill and knowledge. They share factory base networks, and that's where the synergy is for us, is that we've spent a decade, this and then even before Shyft, building these out. And so it's good when we can aggregate all of that. So
Okay. All right. Well, we'll dive into that a little bit more, that kind of
cool
realization about where your time is best spent in working with. And I just want to make sure I'm saying your last name correctly. Burdge.
Yeah,
Okay.
Burdge.
Well, there he is.
Yeah.
Alex Burdge, or Burdge, something like that.
We honestly don't know or believe any of the stories that my dad tells us about our last name, because they change so much that they don't have any, nobody knows.
Are you a dad also?
Yes, 3 kids.
Yeah. Are you going to do that to your kids too? Because I think that's dads do stuff like that. It's like it's inborn. Like you don't know that, and you just start doing it.
I'm not that far into being a dad that I'm blinded to that, but I think I probably will get there.
I used to make fun of my dad for doing that.
Yeah.
And then I've recognized that I do that.
Yeah.
And it's really enjoyable now.
It's the commercials, like you're becoming,
me.
We can't help you from becoming your parents or whatever.
Those are still some of the best commercials.
Great.
I love those commercials.
Yeah. Those, and then the resurgence of the caveman with Geico.
You like that?
I think it's really fun.
Have you seen the new one where they're playing like that? What is that game called?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Heads Up or whatever.
Yeah.
It's Geico.
I love it. And he's like, Mallorca.
Yeah. My favorite one's the one where he's asleep and he wakes up and he's like, they just keep, I don't know what he says. He's like, they just keep, it keeps replaying in my head. Like they made me like a figure, It's so funny.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, Alex. Alex
you.
Burdge, Shyft Global, founder, CEO.
Yeah. Co-founder.
Who
CEO.
is your co-founder?
My dad.
And your dad is a serial entrepreneur?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's great.
It must have been interesting growing up in that household. I mean, that led you down the path. Or do you think you had that even without seeing how your dad went through his work experience?
Hard to know, but definitely benefited me either way significantly. And I if I had to guess, I'd say it impacted me a lot more than I realized at the time. But for me, the biggest part was, it just was how it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like just people started companies. That's just what you do for work. And I knew that not everybody did that, but that was a real privilege to see someone who, and not everything he did was a giant success, but it very successful many times over. And for me, that was cool. Like growing up, for about 17 years, he ran one of the largest printing companies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would go and visit him, 400 employees, all the big presses, all of that. And so I think it was real impactful. It made me feel like, man, one, I have a really cool dad, and two, like this is achievable. Like there's like normal humans do this, and I can do that, and I want to do that. And so it didn't really re-engage until I was a bit older, and then the bug started. But
So you didn't, or did you have this sense of, as you were growing up, like, I want to start something. I want to do this. I love this thing, and I'd love to be able to provide that to the community.
yeah, I think it came and went. So when I was real young,
Mm-hmm.
I can look back now and see propensities that I had that were entrepreneurial, like repackaging baseball cards and selling them and stuff like that.
It's a great story.
Yeah, but for a long time, I didn't think
Yeah.
about that. I thought maybe I'd be a teacher, maybe I'd be a doctor, maybe I'd do what, and then, but you're not. At least for me, I wasn't really serious about what I was going to do when I grew up until I grew up, and then I really started thinking about it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'd say that all set in mostly when I was in college. I started to do side gigs and realized I loved it.
And is that the start of your fascination, I guess, with or interest in supply chain? Was
Yes.
you landed a job with a supply chain or a company that was working in supply chain? You started to get a background in that?
Exactly. Yeah. And that was just by, I remember I was driving to one of my mom's, she was playing tennis. I was with my dad. I was working at a tech company, and I was like, man, I would love to work around you in some way. That'd be fun. And then there was an internship at a company that he had an association with. And so I didn't work too close to him, but it was enough to say I got to start interacting with him in a more professional sense, and then
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of went from there. And it happened to be at a supply chain company. I knew nothing about supply chain, but nobody knows anything about supply chain until you just fall into it or
Mm-hmm.
something. So that's what happened.
And so in that company, in supply chain, is that where you started to think, hey, I could make a difference here. I could make a business out of this. There's an opportunity here that somebody is missing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of the simplified answer. I think what I've found as an entrepreneur is that most of your good ideas come in whatever you understand the best.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just difficult. It's difficult to come up with a truly meaningful value add in an industry that you don't understand deeply the pain points.
Mm-hmm.
And so because that's what I was doing, it was natural to say, hey, I have this bug, this entrepreneurial bug, and I think one of my talents is being able to find solutions to problems. And I saw a bunch of problems, and it led to an opportunity to try to solve them, and we're still working on how to solve them best, but that's kind of what led to it.
So what are some of the things? What did you notice that you thought you could solve?
Yeah, this is pulling back a while. I think the initial thoughts were...
And this is the genesis of Shyft.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And at the time, I only had experience helping companies source products in China.
Mm-hmm.
So Shyft obviously has evolved into kind of a global supply chain, start to finish, multi-country thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that was certainly an evolution. And so part of what I felt like was missing was the customer experience was quite difficult. And that was, without saying anything negative about the place I work, because there was a lot of good people that did good things, but it was pretty brutal because they grew too fast.
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't have strong management hierarchy and training.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't even get a single day of training. And so, and I didn't even know what the lexicon of supply chain, like I didn't even know anything. So I was hearing terms. I was like driving out in the middle of nowhere trying to figure out how to print on stethoscopes, and it was a very inefficient way to help people. But what it did is it helped open my eyes to, hey, the customer experience here is rough. There's a lot of unknowns. There's stuff that ships and it's pink and it was supposed to be white. So the biggest opportunity, and again, I'm careful in saying that because the company did a lot of things well.
Mm-hmm.
But there were certain things they grew too fast and that got out of hand. And I got to see those because I was an account manager and I didn't get to control them, but I had to tell someone your stuff is pink instead of white. And so I was 21 or whatever, it was like, okay, I think I can do this really well with the help of other people. And I think if you just elevated the experience a little and were a little more thoughtful and intentional about the categories you went after and these types of things, you could build a company that could make a difference and kind of stand up above the competition. But that was only possible because that company ended up going out of business. And it wouldn't have been natural for me to go and start a business in supply chain. I probably would have just gone and done something else.
Mm-hmm.
But that company, while I was employed there, went out of business. And I was just, again, I wasn't a very important part of that company, but I was a part of it. And so it was like either get a job or start a company. And this is what I know how to do, so I'll start a company.
And you had been obviously thoughtful about what was happening
right
at that company. So, but your dad, I wouldn't say your dad was in supply chain.
Yes and no. I mean, because he's owned several factories.
Uh-huh.
He helped co-found a company that did imports.
Okay.
That's now a pretty significant company. He sold his interest off years ago. So in that sense, he understood supply chain, but not the way that Shyft does it as much. That's been a lot of development since then. It was a different type of supply chain mostly.
Yeah.
But he was anyway. Yeah.
And so the reason, did you go to him and say, I want to start this company, I want you to be my partner? Is that how it worked, or was there something else that happened?
It was actually, so at the time I was looking at starting a company. I had made up my mind I want to do this. And he was the CEO of a different company at the time. And there was this realization that, hey, there's an opportunity here.
Mm-hmm.
We can try to, we couldn't really continue necessarily what the other company had done because, but in terms of what the service, the problem solution, there's a need for this,
Mm-hmm.
and we can add value. And so he basically said, hey, why don't we do this together?
Gotcha.
And I said, because I was brash and it took me a while to get over some of the dumb things in my head, but I said, well, I want to be in charge.
Mm-hmm.
I need to it actually needs to be, because this is what I'm looking for in my life. I want to be the CEO. I want to do all this and yada, yada, yada. And he said, well, that's great because I don't want to be in charge. He was running another company and, he's done that enough that he doesn't want to be the CEO anymore. And so it was actually a great fit. And so for the first, I'd say year and a half, 2 years, it was mostly me and then one or two employees that I had hired. And that was intentional because he was running another company. But he was certainly pivotal. We couldn't have done it without his help.
Yeah.
He gave us a loan. He gave us a $70,000 loan.
Yeah.
Couldn't have done it without that. I mean, we couldn't have done it. Who knows? But we wouldn't have been where we are without all of those things. And then he came and focused fully on it with me, and he's just so critical to our growth and our company. So,
and how I obviously the money was important. How important was his business experience and wisdom?
Oh, I think it's more important than I ever gave it credit for because, again, to your point, he understood import and supply chain generally, but there was no playbook for what we were doing. So in the sense that it wasn't a father-son thing where it's like the father built a business and he taught his son, hey, this is how you master it. We didn't have that because it was a new frontier largely for both of us. We were only a couple of years into understanding this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that was good because that meant that there was a lot of autonomy and he gave me freedom to make a lot of mistakes. But I think where I got the most value was less about the specifics of how to run the company, and it was more just about the bigger lessons. He's been through stress that, many magnitudes of what I was experiencing. He's been through hiring and firing, laying off, scaling, raising money, and he was able to provide a lot of cautionary tales to me. You know, I wanted to give away a lot of equity early on because it's the thing to do.
For sure.
But
Yeah,
as
like,
a 21-year-old,
hey, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And
and you don't realize that, and luckily we have a couple of those people that are just amazing and they're still with us and they're absolutely deserving of, you know, that's evolved since. But there were, 95% of the people in the first 4 years are gone. And they were great. They were fantastic. But if I had just parsed out all the equity, and I wouldn't have given it all away, but things like that, he was, really, really helpful.
Well,
And is still.
I was curious about that because I would think if you have someone to rely on, I mean, you're a 21, 22, 23-year-old kid at this point.
At the time, we started in 2017, so I would have been, I'm 31 now. We started 7 years ago. So 20, I think I was 23, turned 24.
Okay, and so it's unlikely that you've experienced any of that stuff, and and who knows how you would have responded. I mean, maybe you would have responded with delays or layoffs or employment problems or whatever. Maybe you would have responded perfectly.
Yeah.
But to have someone who's
I wouldn't have.
who's already been through that, I mean, that experience and wisdom seems like it was critical.
Oh yeah.
So okay. So you've decided now that you have this idea about what you want to do. You want to start a business. You have an idea about it. Did you put this down on paper? Did you write out a business plan? What was your what was your foundation? Was it? Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to give you some things. You can tell me what it was, but just hearing you talk, was it like, we're going to provide the best customer experience possible? We're going to be super efficient in sourcing products and working with factories overseas. We're going to expand this network and provide solutions for what were the things that
that's giving way too much credit for the idea. I think it was, honestly, it was an exercise of how long can we go without running out of money? And so the $70,000, mind you, didn't actually give us runway. Mm-hmm. It was to enable a couple of initial orders. We had to front the money. So it was a loan that we paid back. So it wasn't operating capital. We didn't raise the money. So we legitimately had $5,000 to $10,000 in the bank for the first year at any time.
Yeah.
But so the business plan was, hey, we can help people make their product. And I have a list of ideas in the back of my head of things that I think we can do eventually that will be really exciting. And part of that was technology and dashboards. And, we had a dream, but it was a seed at the time. Like, there wasn't a lot of thought beyond. Really what we spent the majority of our day thinking of was, okay, do we have enough? We had a few customers. Do we have enough orders to make sure that we can make payroll? And our payroll was probably $4,000,
Yeah.
And so it was like, that was it. And I remember viscerally going back, and I remember the days that first year when it was like, oh man, we have 2 months that I know will survive. Like, I know we can stay in business for 2 months because we have this order, and if we don't mess anything up, we're good. And it was that, and then it was, oh my gosh, like 6 months. We could do 6 months. And then I remember the day in the first year when we finally actually got an accounting software. We got QuickBooks. Mm-hmm. Because it was just, I don't even know what we were doing. I don't know that we even used Excel. Like, we were doing it, but the first time we actually plugged in the data to QuickBooks, and it said that we had done over $1 million in revenue, and I was just like, how did that even happen? We were just like 2000. We were selling the hoverboards on the side of the road. We were doing whatever, and so in our first year, we ended up doing about 2.2 million. So we'd like to tell people, and we're proud of this, that we were profitable from like day 40. But the secret to profitability is that you have $10,000 in overhead. Like, it's not that impressive, but it gives you an insight into how we slow rolled into this. That's kind of how we did it.
So was your initial pitch that we can build your product? Like, so that's what you were going. That was your go-to-market strategy.
That was it. But it was like, we can build it in China. And we had one employee in China. We're like, we can build your product, but not even that. It's like, you need to figure out your product, and then I can build it.
And then,
like, I can't design it. I can't do tech packs. I can't do.
Okay.
You literally come to me, and I'll help you find a factory.
Oh man.
And so the value add was there, but it was, needed some help.
I think I think that we could spend a long time. I would love to go through all of those steps because compared to that start of we can build your product to where you are today and that evolution, I think would be fascinating to talk about. I just don't think we have enough time to talk about that. So we'll try and hit on all of those
Sounds great.
pieces. By the way, I've watched you in several podcasts and I've listened to a bunch of stuff that you've done. Do you wear a different hat on all of your appearances?
It's so funny you said that because I deliberately wore this hat because I'm like, I can't wear the same hat that and I don't do a lot of podcasts. I'm not, but I have go-to hats, and I had to make sure I didn't wear one of those, but I am a hat guy.
Yeah.
I love hats.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, do you make hats? You probably can make a hat.
Yeah. Yeah, we make hats.
You had a New York Yankees hat on one of the podcasts I was watching. I was wondering if that World Series debacle
No,
was
and you know what's
upsetting for you.
funny? And I'm a poser because I have a bunch of baseball hats that I don't care anything about the teams. I just like the look.
Gotcha.
People stop me every time I wear. I have a Yankees and the Giants. Well, the Giants we like because we've had friends in San Francisco, so we've been to a few games with our kids. But anyway, yeah, I'm a poser.
Gotcha. Well, that's okay.
That's the name of this podcast.
The Poser.
Alex Burdge. I'm a poser.
The Poser.
That'll get some traction.
Kind of sounds like that. Like, well, we can make you a product. Like we can
Yeah.
we can do that. Okay, so you go out on the street and you're telling people we can make your product.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you discover that you're profitable and you're doing pretty well. How does that evolve to what is the next thing? So now you're making products, but what is the next thing that you say if we did this, we could improve this much? Or did you just fall into something else?
Well, at least for me, there are probably more brilliant entrepreneurs, but for me, most of brilliance is you falling into stuff that you didn't think about, right? Until it was an opportunity and then you saw it and you went after it. But I would say, and you get more deliberate as you go for sure. But actually the geopolitical and global events that have kind of plagued and defined supply chain for the last 7 years have been significant turnstiles in the evolution of our company. So for example, 6 months into our company, President Trump started the trade war. So all of a sudden, the 25% tariff, what that meant was, well, we were only in China. What that meant was that companies, and it's still in place today, and obviously he just announced more tariffs over the weekend, but he's not even president yet, but he's threatening that.
He's already thrown that out, yeah.
But what happened was 6 months in, right as we're kind of starting to get some momentum, 25% tariff on a lot of core categories. So we have customers that have 42 to 45% tariffs because they already had 20 to 30% on their product. Another 25%, whatever the numbers are, but I know specifically backpacks are around 45%. So you talk about making a backpack for $20 and then you pay $3 for shipping, but then you pay another 10 or 8 in duty. It just killed everybody's economics. So we thought, okay, well, if we're going to be a solution here, we've got to somehow get outside of China and go into another region that's got these same capabilities. So we didn't exodus China. We're still there, and they're amazing at a lot of things. But what we did was we set up an office in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. And it didn't start out as an office. It started out as a single, 1099 employee. Just like our guy, we'd built a few in China. And so that was, I would say, the first real evolution of, okay, all of a sudden Shyft is no longer just to let us buy or build your thing in China. It was, now we can build it in China or Vietnam, and then it started to evolve as we built that office there, or in Southeast Asia. So you're talking about, okay, and then we can go into India, and we can go. And so it started to kind of spread because of the trade war. Well, and then what happened was we had some interest from some customers to go to Mexico. But Mexico has been a sleeping giant in a lot of industries for a long time, and it's really had a rebirth because of COVID. And so in some industries, it's been strong and remains strong. But anyway, not to give you too long of an answer, but those are the events. So it was the trade war, and then it was COVID.
So it's not necessarily like you were sitting down thinking, because you were having success building product in China, and you weren't necessarily thinking, we need to spread out our footprint. We need a larger footprint of production.
Yeah, we were forced to
capability.
think that way.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. And so just to understand how the tariffs work a little bit from the consumer perspective.
Yep.
You're trying to build a product in China and bring it to the U.S. and sell it in the U.S. And what does that? So when a tariff is in place, what does that mean to the end consumer? If I'm buying the backpack, you're producing the backpack, you need to make a margin, the company needs to make a margin.
Yeah.
What does that mean for the end user?
Well, it's hard to fully kind of prognosticate on on the decisions that the brands make, but generally speaking, there are underlying economics that each of these players in between can't violate and remain profitable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and what you're kind of getting at here is that it's not simply any one link in that chain that pays for it. Ultimately, it does push through, and a lot of brands choose to increase the price of their goods.
Yeah.
Because who can handle that? Who can handle a 40%? And then you've got Amazon taking their piece, and these guys taking their piece. And by the time it gets to the brand, you're lucky if you've got 5 or 10% of it at a lot of brands, right? And so you can't. So I think that's a real problem. And you'll see the polarity in the discussion right now of additional tariffs. Is this going to do what you think it's going to do, or is it just going to hurt the American people and inflate products more?
Yeah.
And there's opinions on both sides of the table, but
it's
a lot of it's a scare tactic.
It is, absolutely. And it's a difficult question. And I don't know that, well, you're probably more well-equipped than I am to manage this question. So maybe we'll leave that for another time.
Yeah, let's leave it for someone else. Yeah.
Yes. So, okay. So that's interesting. You expanded your footprint, and that just made you, I'm sure that just made you more valuable in the market when you could now go out to a customer and say, not only can we make your product, but we have 6 or 7 different options, production facilities, and they're meaningful in all of these different ways. What, as you look, go ahead. Did you want to say something about that?
No, I was just going to say a lot of people. So I just said no, and then I gave you an answer. So yes, I do want to say something. A lot of people would say, "Man, it must be so difficult for you with supply chain, and it's been the theme, and on and on and on." It's like, yes, it's been difficult, but it's been harder for the brand because we exist. The harder the problems, the more valuable we are. And I don't say that to be unthoughtful about how difficult it is. In terms of hard, it's a pain in the neck because we have to learn how to figure out how to solve it. So yes, it's very hard in that way, and it would be easier to smooth sail. But it's presented an opportunity for Shyft to say, okay, well, there's a problem here for brands. Can we be the one who solves it? And if we can be the one who solves it, then we can win and the brand can win. And we try to put ourselves on the same side of the table as the brand. So it's been difficult, but it's been an accelerant to progress in a way that I would never, you of course would never want a pandemic to happen. But if you try to look at the silver lining, there has been acceleration and positive things too. And for us, that certainly happened. And it helped counterbalance the amount of attrition that naturally happened at the same time. And so you got to take, whatever it is, and for us try to turn it into something good. But
would you, at your core, consider yourself or Shyft just a solutions provider?
Yeah. So the short that we tell people is that we are supply chain strategy and implementation. So that's what makes us a bit unique. You'll find strategists, you'll find consultants. You can go pay Bain or who you can pay people a lot of money. And they'll say, "Here's a plan."
Yep.
But to find someone who's going to say, "Here's a plan," and we're on the line to make it happen.
Yes.
That's what we've tried to bridge.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so that's kind of an inflection point for Shyft. You're going out first. You're saying we can build a product, and then because of things happening in the world, you have to expand your footprint. What is another? Can you think of another inflection point in the company where, like you said, maybe it is not necessarily strategy, or maybe it was tied to some strategy?
Yeah.
That pushed you in another direction?
Yeah. I mean, we made a big decision in 2022, I think, maybe right before that, to build out a pretty robust product team. So I told you in the first few years we were ops guys, and we said, build your product and then bring it to us. Well, we started to realize that, hey, there's a big constituency here that isn't getting what we could sell them. if we had the ability to also build the product, design the product, make the tech packs. And a lot of it was driven by quality. Because what you find is if you don't have product people building the blueprint, it's like having a non-architect build the home.
Yeah.
You can get all the contractors you want in the world, but then they are handicapped.
Not to interrupt you,
No, yeah,
but I have a little experience in this, and I will even say that in that world. And I'm wondering if it is analogous here. You can work with an architect, and an architect can design something that looks amazing on paper in blueprint form.
Yep.
But if you don't also have experience as the contractor, as the guy who's actually building what you have put on paper, there can also be
Exactly.
a disconnect.
Yep.
So your ability to bridge that gap has to be really meaningful.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you hit it spot on. That was the pitch. It was, hey, again, you can go to a design firm. This was another bridge we tried to make. You can go to a design firm, and I have nothing bad to say about design firms, but the reality is unless it's a graphic medium, it's packaging, it's paper, it's things that you can see tangibly, they can make a beautiful backpack. But unless you understand the sewing method at a factory of how the pockets have to come together, about the assembly order, about the constraints, the materials, the tests that are going to have to be done for it to be worn the way it needs to be worn with weight in it. I've met a lot of people that say, hey, I just paid a design firm $250,000 and they gave me something really beautiful. Went to the factory and the factory said, we can't build that.
Make it.
And so we said, well, hire the guys who can do both. And all of our designers are deliberately going to understand manufacturing. They'll have worked with actual product. They'll have worked at brands, so they know what your pain points are.
Yeah.
And then when we design, we will design understanding the end and keeping the end in mind.
Yeah.
We'll optimize not only for product experience, but we'll also optimize for cost along the way. So we can tell you, hey, we can design it with all these pockets, but if you did this, this, and this, you're also got to think about your cost and what you're selling it for. And so that was that was a more deliberate strategic move. And we got really lucky to have some amazing designers join the team and developers, and we built that out. And that took our quality on the manufacturing side and our customer experience way up.
Okay, I wanted to. You've mentioned a couple things there. I want to talk about. One is, so now you're able to go to the market, and a guy and somebody says, well, I have this idea about a product, a really good idea, but like if I come to you and I say I have this really good idea for a product, and you say to me, well, build the product, and I'm like, well, that's it. I don't know how to build that product. I don't even know where to start. It's just this. Now they can come to you and say, I have this great idea for a product. You can evaluate. You can even evaluate the idea and say, this is why it's great. This is where it needs work, and then turn it over to your team to actually develop it, build it, and have quality control all at the same time to help ensure as much as possible the success of that product.
Exactly. And that's really the motivation is if we have a customer that comes in and has a one-time order, neither of us win. Because we're really after a residual relationship. We don't make a lot of money, if any, on our first orders because there's so much work to build the supply chain. But if we can help them to have recurring orders, then everyone's winning. But part of the magic and one of the additional pivots was not only can we design products, but we've brought in, we have some technology partners. We have some resources where we actually can tell the brand what they should make. And so instead of a brand coming and saying, I have an idea, can you design it? They can say, why don't you study our brand? And why don't you tell us what we should make?
Okay, so when you're saying that, are you now also involved in market research?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So we have several, one, and maybe leaving names out of it, but the several multi-hundred million or multi-billion-dollar companies that's what they found interest in Shyft in, because they're not the traditional startup or younger company that's going to say, hey, take over my whole supply chain. But what they find a lot of value in is saying, listen, we have buying power, we have distribution. One of them's a $16 billion, thousands of stores. And they can say, hey, this is a category that we think is trending, or this is a thing that we think, and just very generally, why don't you go study our consumer? Why don't you figure out how to build it? Why don't you come back with silhouettes, tie it all together, and just basically click go? And then we can buy it, test it in our distribution. If it goes well, we'll buy more of it, and so we can do that. Or a brand will come to us, and we had two brands that we're helping. And one of them I can share because it's already on the market is Brixton out of Oceanside,
Sure.
California.
Yeah.
And the other is another really cool company that is in the professional gear space.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but they both came to us, and again, they said, in these categories, we're fine. We're big. We've been around. We know how to make X, Y, and Z. Brixton, they know how to make their clothes and their hats.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that Shyft couldn't help, but it wasn't the right value add.
Yeah.
They said, but this whole new category, can you, again, study our consumer, come back, pitch to us, incorporate our iconic silhouettes, and we did that, and we were able to launch a new program with them. And so that's been a fun evolution.
Yeah.
It's not where we make the majority of our money, but it's a meaningful channel for us, and it's one of the more fun ways to make our money.
And to create stickiness with a customer, that's
Totally.
got to be meaningful. Okay, so did a customer come to you and initially and say, we have this idea, can you do market research? And then you said, we need to learn how to do market research? Or is that something that sort of evolved?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think back when we first did it. I don't know. Yeah, I would probably have to think a long time to figure out the first customer that asked
That
us
seems
to
to
do that.
me like a really interesting point. Like when we go into the Shyft Global offices, you need to have that on your wall. Like, okay, we went out and we were saying, we can build your product.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is we're multi-footprint
Yeah.
production facility. And then that one, I like that. We need a market research line in there. When did that
Honestly,
start in your company?
I'm going to think about that. I don't know. But it was probably about 2.5, 3 years ago.
Yeah. I think that's to me, that feels like next level kind of service.
Yeah.
Which leads me to the next thing, because you've mentioned this a couple times, is the customer experience or the client experience is paramount for you and for your team, sounds like.
Yeah.
And this is something that you experienced when you first got into supply chain and how the customer experience is intricately tied to the success of the company.
Yes, and it is a challenge. And you alluded to building homes.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, building a home is the analogy I use most commonly to building supply chains. It's one of the most emotionally charged purchases. It's somebody's baby.
Absolutely.
They have a very, very clear picture on what they want, what they don't want,
Mm-hmm.
and things that to a contractor may not be a big deal. It's a shade off the Pantone of the light switch. To the buyer, they had a vision.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, it's difficult to find a home buyer that has an unbelievable reputation all the time, even if they're good, because of the amount of emotion that goes into it. And looking back, people tend to be more forgiving of just reality. But in the moment, there's a lot of emotion, right?
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of emotion when I built my home and had some challenges and different things. And so I would say that combined with the fact that we were a bootstrapped company, and as well-intentioned as you want to be and as hard as you want to work, you're only what you are. And I was and still am now very inadequate in a lot of ways, and that's just honest. And our team feels that, but we've been able to put a lot of great people on our team as we had the money to do it, to allow us to elevate and to keep elevating. And I would say that we are a premium experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what the hallmark of Shyft is, I would hope our customers would say, is that if there is a challenge, if there is a mistake, if there is a problem, we are the kind of company that won't just kind of, we'll see what happens. We will dive on the grenade the best that we can, because we do recognize how important somebody's product is for their brand.
Yeah.
And so hopefully I think we have a good reputation because of that, more than because of things never go wrong. Because in supply chains, things go wrong every day.
Yeah.
But we try hard to be good and fair and honest and good partners. We do our best.
I heard you talk about once companies have a belief that I can build this. I mean, I can go to China. There's a ton of factories, or I can go to India, or I could go to Mexico, and I know exactly what I want, and I could have this built, and I can run this piece of my business, and by doing that, I'm going to save $1 per product by doing this myself. And you have an interesting, I'll let you talk about that, but you have an interesting thought about that, about somebody who takes his or her time away from running a business
Yeah.
to build a product in the business.
Well, and there isn't a one size fits all. And so some brands, let's say this, I'm just a big believer in delegation. I'm a big believer in partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you look at the return on your time, that's the biggest thing. I mean, that's when a lot of founding teams hire us, because they say, at some point, it's not about can I do it. I mean, you could say that about anything in life.
Sure, absolutely. We have a team of developers over here who think, well, if we have an idea, they're going to build it.
Exactly.
But, they just don't have that much time in a day, in a week, in a year to build all of the things that we want to build.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, is everybody has a finite amount of time, but also there's a ratio, right, for the amount of time you put into something.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a book that I love. A lot of people have read it. It's Good to Great. I don't know, have you read Good to Great?
Sure, absolutely.
Classic, great book, but the hedgehog principle, this idea of the combination, if you can find where you can be the best in the world at, where you're deeply passionate about, and what drives your economic engine. And the economic engine specifically is profit per X. So what we invite companies to do is say, hey, listen, your profit per X model that gets you the highest return. And for most brands, it's not supply chain. For most brands, these are creative people. They're inventors, they're marketers, they're brand builders. And that's a really difficult skill to replicate. It's something only they can do. They understand and they have a vision. You can't outsource that very easily. And that's not to say some other agencies, but specifically the building of your company can't be outsourced in that kind of magical way that only a founding team can do. But what can be outsourced is you being up all night, trying to talk to somebody in broken English, trying to hope your product is right. You don't have boots on the ground. So in your mind, you add up these costs and think, I might be able to save 10% or 15% or 5%. Well, kind of our invitation is, number one, we really believe that you can't. And that's really just probably not intended to be brash, but it's just to say there is an exponential effect of hiring someone that all they do all day is this. Somebody who has the relationships, that's also pushing other brands through that same factory, that can go get you a better price, that can make sure there's no quality and make sure that it ships on time. And you start to add up all of these things. And that's not to say that if someone doesn't use a company like Shyft, they're not smart. I mean, a lot of brands have it worked out and they do an awesome job. It's just to say that think twice about the theory versus what you should be doing. Because a lot of the time it's not the case.
Yeah, and even if you could demonstrate on paper that you're saving, 10% by building this product, does anyone ever calculate the other side of it, about all the stuff that you're talking about all of the other time now you're spending on producing this item? What are the lost costs in all of those activities? It's hard because a lot of us just feel like, well, I'm going to get it done. I can get it done.
Yeah.
And without maybe fully considering all of the consequences of that.
I think so. And I think, again, it's there's a lot of ways to get to success.
Sure.
And we hope at Shyft that we can aid in that for companies that it fits.
Yeah.
And we feel really strongly that the people on our team and the factories that we've worked with and the time we put in can be a great benefit.
Yeah.
And so that's as much as I'll say. But again, I've seen a lot of brands just crush it and do as well or far better than Shyft does even. I mean, there's just amazing people out there and amazing brands. And so we don't ever pitch like we're the way, but we also have we have a confidence that what we're doing we're good at it. And if people will let us take a look under the hood and look in the supply chain, it is very uncommon that we can't come back with material savings for them to put in their pocket. And that's why we're motivated, is because it's not a sales pitch of, hey, pay us more and save time. The sales pitch is, we'll pay you to work with us and save time.
Yeah.
And if we can do that, then it's a good pitch.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
Hard to turn that one down.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting what's happened recently. You and I were talking, I don't know, a month or so ago about what I would consider another inflection point in the company, and maybe becoming more focused on where you can be as valuable as possible on a particular subset of customers. And so that feels like another evolution. And is that something that you realized over time? Is that something, it's the same thing, or is that something that all of a sudden you just can't? I mean, you started going out to people and saying, "Hey, we can build your product," and that probably incorporated, a whole world of people, and now you've become more focused, I guess, is the word I'd like to use.
Yeah.
On your customer.
Yes. So there's been two core insights over the last, I'd say, 18 to 24 months.
Mm-hmm.
The first one was probably 18 months ago, 24 months ago maybe. And it was actually we had an executive retreat. We always go up to Park City, and we come up with our best ideas in a giant hot tub there in Park City. Yeah, and so we've done that a few times.
Is that a thing? Is there a giant hot tub?
There is. There's one of the hotels up there that we go to. But until I saw the bill last time, and I'm thinking, why are we booking this? This is an expensive, hot tub. But we did that, and we kind of had this over that weekend while we were up there. We had this realization of, okay, how do we make sure? Because for any agency, the question that you fear the most is, should I build this in-house?
Mm-hmm.
It's just every agency in the world, right? Unless you have something highly proprietary, which we're always working towards, doing more and more of that. And we would consider our networks and our boots on the grounds and things, those types of moats. But even still, so we thought, well, how do we make sure that conversation is not relevant? And we said, well, what we have to do is make sure we are perfectly aligned with the brand. Because if our measure of success is exactly lined up with the CEO and the board and the other core members of that team, and we're driven to put their success ahead of ours naturally, that then you kind of avoid that conversation, because you're not seen as an either or as much. You're seen as kind of a plug-in to help accomplish your goals that you have. And so that might seem, I don't know that was very clear, but for specifically what we said is our mission now, and our written mission statement, is to maximize profitability of brands. So our mission isn't to maximize our profitability. Our mission isn't to do all, our mission is measured by and in parallel to how much money can I put back in my customer's pocket. And if I can do that over and over and over again, then why would they ever build this in-house? Because that is a gamble, to think that you could do it if you have a proven partner that's doing it over and over and over. So that was one big evolution, and that pitch changed. Now if you go to our website, there's money in your supply chain, we can find it. It's a really good intro instead of being an agency. So that's one.
Okay, don't forget about two, but I just want to follow up on one. When did you realize that, or when did that become clear? That kind of messaging of there's money in your supply chain. I don't think anybody ever thinks of it that way. And the model you're talking about is are you familiar with the servant leadership kind of philosophy? If not, there's a great book called, I think it's called The Servant Leader.
I need to read it. I'm not very familiar.
But it's very aligned with that philosophy of being a servant to the people, being a servant to the people you work with, and being a servant to your customers, that kind of mentality. And that's what it sounds like. And so when did that become clear as like, wait, there's money in the supply chain. If we can provide that to the customer, that's meaningful.
Well, I think it was during that same retreat that all of that kind of, as an executive team, we said, the light bulb started to come on and say, that's it. But the thing was, it wasn't that wasn't our focus, but it wasn't our message.
That's what I mean, is how did you develop? So in the back of your mind, maybe you knew it, you understood it, but now the messaging came out.
Yeah, and I think it was. Yeah. I think it was just kind of trying to come up with what's a really clear way to get out our pitch. Because again, an elevator pitch at Shyft in the first few years was just, it had to be a really long elevator, because it was like this winding. Well, we could do this, or we could do that, or we could do this and this and this, and it was like, just hire us. We can do something to help you.
We can do whatever you need. We can do it.
We can do it.
Yes,
and we did a lot of random things, but it refined, and it became clear. And so and we talk about it, we have a meeting every couple of weeks as a company, and we quiz everybody on, what are we trying to accomplish here, until it's just cemented in everyone's mind that you don't make a decision unless you think it leads to our brands making more money, period. Because if it's not connected, then what we're saying essentially is, you think we should do something, implement a software or do a partnership or do this or that our brand isn't willing to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you start to get misalignment, and you start to invest in things that don't really make either of you money.
Yeah.
So that's been good. That's been a good North Star. And then the second one
Yes.
was trying to pivot towards focus. And what we found is when I was over in Vietnam, I don't know which of the trips, but we were over at one of the largest, if not the largest backpack manufacturer in the world. So they have thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of employees. They have plants all over.
Mm-hmm.
The facility we were at outside of Ho Chi Minh was probably 4,000 to 6,000 people making bags. And as you walked through, it was the I think it's Marc Jacobs, or anyway, the tote, like the famous tote. There was Lululemon, there was North Face, there was like the brands I was seeing as I walked through it. It was just awesome.
Yeah.
And we were working with one of the VF Corporation companies, helping them do some product, and so we were there seeing the product. And what I noticed on that trip was that the North Face has a big team in plant. So the former hypothesis of a younger me was, if you find a good enough factory, you don't need, like, that is the secret.
Gotcha.
Find the right factory. But this actually broke that hypothesis, because I said, well, wait a minute.
It's the right factory plus.
They have 100 people or 50, whatever the number is. I mean, they didn't have just one inspector there. They had an in-plant team. They had a whole division in the infrastructure that was the VF Corporation North Face team.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, why on earth, so then that started a whole chain of, okay, well, there's something here then.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it was one of those things that we had bought into the principles, because we put boots on the ground and we have these teams and we touted that was important, but we never connected why fully until I saw this. And I said, okay, well, this is what the big boys do. This is actually counter to what everyone thinks. And so I'm going to try to simulate what North Face does. And we're going to, what we talk about is our mission is to democratize the enterprise level supply chain to everybody else. Very much a lot of inspiration from Intuit, with the QuickBooks and the TurboTax and there is probably 2% of e-commerce companies that are, maybe 1% that are that enterprise level. 98% are sub $10 million. 97% are sub $5 million in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but when you're sub 5 or 10 or even $20 million in revenue, you're not building in-plant teams. That's not logical. You don't have the resources of the people. But you need the results that drives, otherwise your brand
of having an implant team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that is what Shyft has become, is not just implant teams. And so we doubled down on building just unbelievable teams. In my opinion, I'm very biased, but unbelievable teams. One of the biggest challenges that we have, so there are events that we're challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a more kind of esoteric answer that's, maybe I can address both. But the first, I mean, we especially in the early years, you have a long list of things that should have killed your company.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that has to do with, we had, we wired money. We were a few months in, wired our entire bank account, actually more than our entire bank account, because it was part of deposits as well, out, and it turned out to be a fraud, and it was like, we probably can't get it back. And I'm just so inexperienced. I don't know what to. Somebody hacked our emails for a week, and they imitated perfectly the factory, gave me the paperwork.
Oh man,
it's only gotten more sophisticated. I mean, people try to steal money
all the time,
like a few times a week.
Oh, that's maddening.
We've had all kinds of things stolen or attempted to be stolen, and so you get real good at noticing those, and that's another value add, is trying to protect from that. But
yeah,
again, not perfect, especially early on. So we've had early production runs that were in magnitude larger than what we could recover, that went south. The factory made a mistake. They wouldn't own up to it. We had these moments of, this is it, like, we're done. We did everything we could. The factory, they're not being honorable. They didn't do their part, and I can't force them to. Who am I?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a 24-year-old, 25-year-old kid in Utah. This is a big company in a different part of the world. So we most of those were first 18 months, because you build systems and people around those. But you have those moments of challenge, and then you have moments that you think, because you spiral, that everything's going to come down. So you have moments that you think that everything's going to come down, And those still happen, but you build a thick skin because you know. And the thing I love to tell my employees and myself when I get wound up is everything has always worked out. I mean, that's a cliche thing to say, but when you really when you can be calm and say, it's never not worked out, doesn't mean it wasn't hard. We're still here.
Yeah.
We're still here. And we fought a lot of things just like any young company. And so that there are moments, but I think the biggest challenge for me is that this industry and this experience was a much bigger, like I didn't realize the pond I was going to swim in. And if I did, I probably wouldn't have. Because and that is a combination of me being real with my capabilities coming into it and the size of the problems. And every company, I really am a firm believer that difficult is relative and that it's naive
Sure.
to think that anyone's lot is more difficult than another. Because if it's not this, it's something else.
Sure.
But for me specifically, to work with people I don't know all over the world as a 24-year-old and try to get them to build product at a high fidelity for brands that it was their entire, if it didn't happen, they're out. There have been a lot of those moments where if you don't make this product and it's not made right and it's not made on time, we missed Black Friday. This is our last straw. We're out of business. I mean, the stakes were so much bigger than I realized when we were starting out. And so that's been hard because you get frustrated with your own inability. Yeah, it's just difficult.
Yeah, sure.
Nobody has the answer. And as an entrepreneur, you say people are looking to me. And I'm not some kind of a wizard. I'm not some magical entrepreneur. I'm just trying to figure it out. And so what you do to combat that is you hire. And that's the reason that I love being a CEO, is because it's not about you. It's about how good you can it's about how good the people around you are. And that I can do. That I can pitch a vision and I can get people excited. And then I have these unbelievable people that can execute and keep us moving and keep our customers, feeling highly serviced and all these things. That's really the secret. And that's been both the most difficult thing, but also the thing that's made it possible.
Well, that brings up a question. If, talking about all the challenges that you've had to overcome, which are significant, would you consider the best thing that you do at Shyft is surrounding yourself with good people? And as a follow-up, how important is the culture at Shyft?
Yeah, those are good questions. Absolutely. First question, it's not just the people, but it's the network. So it mirrors, but it's really interesting. And you wish you knew this when you started the company. And again, I got really lucky with a few hires. But if you just hire as an executive, as a CEO, if you hire 2 people right, it's done. Like that's it. Because they will hire 2 people that are right. And they will hire the next people that are right. And if you hire the wrong people, it's also done. And you're going to have to rebuild it over and over. And I've made both. I've both hired the right people and seen it, the domino effect, and I've hired the wrong people. And wrong in that we've not had any terrible situations. We always had good people, but the right people for the job. They may not have been the right person for that seat. And so if you can hone that skill of just saying, simplify all of this, it's not actually that complicated. Your job as a CEO is to hire the 2 people. And it's different for every company. Maybe it's a CFO and a COO. Maybe it's a whatever.
Yeah.
And then the dominoes will play themselves out. And that eliminates upfront 80% of what you were going to spend your time trying to fix. And so I only know that now looking back because I did it wrong a lot. But I also did it right a few times, and I got to see that. And now we're better at that. And so that, and it's the same domino effect when you pick a logistics partner, when you pick 3PL partners, when you pick factory partners, when you pick people overseas. And another challenge I didn't foresee is how different our cultures are. I mean, that is a real challenge. And so when it's a challenge because it's different, not because just because it's different. And so we have our general manager is half Swiss, half French. We have people that are nationals of India, Vietnam, China, Mexico, the U.S. Like the amount of, when we were like an 11-person team, we had like 9 different nationalities in that team, which was awesome. But they all speak different languages, trying to meet in the middle at English. They all have very different perceptions about how to succeed. What their culture rewards is success. Americans are very nuanced in what they value in certain categories. And I know now I'm going off on a different question,
No,
but
this is fantastic.
it is, even to this day, far more difficult than I had imagined. But the magical part is when it works, and you have people from different cultures coming together, and you have people with different skill sets and mindsets contributing to team meetings. And yes, what it means is that our amazing COO, Norm Skirkovich, it means that most nights he's up. We're 7 years in, and most nights he's up for 4 hours a night or 2 hours a night. He's up at 2 a.m. Because you have to bridge, and that will go away. We've done some we're really doubling down on the team over there. So he lived over there for a month in August and did some other things, but there's sacrifice and there's challenge, and that's one of the challenges I didn't foresee. But it's also a really beautiful thing when it works, and it's something I feel really privileged to be a part of, because at a young age I got to start to appreciate things that I wouldn't have been exposed to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess you would think about that in the back of your head, like, well, okay, so we're building this product overseas, and so it's a little, not just the time of day is different, but work culture is different.
Yeah.
Relaxation culture is different, and so maybe you kind of think about that, but until you're your elbows deep into it, you don't understand that. And that's got to be critical, understanding all of those different pieces to go back to making the best customer experience possible. And so building out your teams, like you're saying, hiring the right people, putting the right people in place, building your teams, critical. Okay, let me ask you this question before I get to my favorite part.
You did ask about culture, and I want to say something.
Yes.
Because I've actually come to appreciate culture more and more. I was a pretty no frills when we started this. Just we're just gonna get the work done, and I still think there's a place for intensity. But again, if you hire the right people, you don't have to be intense. You just don't have to, because they're already intense in their own mind, and and so, like, culture is tied to whoever you hire. And so, yes, it starts at the top, and you as an executive team, you try to set the tone and stuff, but really, it's actually the most effective way, in my opinion, to build a culture is just to hire the right people. And the culture will automatically happen, because good people, they're all trying to, instead of having entropy in the wrong direction, entropy goes into the right direction. And it just gets better and better and better. And people have suggestions, and they treat each other kindly. And for Shyft, honestly, on the hardest days, it's the thing that I go back to that makes everything worth it, is if we have people that feel that they are being employed in an environment that makes them happy. And that sounds really corny, but when you have hard days and you have nothing else to hang on to that day, you start to realize what you actually care about. And it's that, and I certainly have not been perfect at it, but I do think that Shyft, it's those moments when an employee says, I hope that I work here for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow.
That means
That's
something.
actually really cool.
Yeah.
And so, but the people are responsible for that. The people you bring in, they build it. So anyway, back to your question.
No, I think it's great, because that resonates. And we've seen just in our company here with eHub that it's clear when you have the right people in place.
Yeah.
And it's clear when you have people in place who may not be aligned, and how damaging that can be.
Oh yeah.
For the company. And it can be very challenging to overcome that kind of an issue. So that really resonates. I think that resonates with lots of people. I think it's a recurring theme on this podcast is culture and the people. When it's right, it's right, and everything elevates. So I appreciate that context. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. What is your very favorite thing that you've ever built?
That's a good question. Someone once asked me this before, and I could not think of it, and so I'm hopeful I have a better answer. What is my personal favorite thing that we've ever manufactured?
You've built some really cool things. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen some of the product. I've seen the bags. I've seen some of the in-home stuff.
I think Yeah, and I don't know why it's a hard question because we have, and I love all the products for the most part that come through. But I'm trying to give a more intentional answer here. I think for me, we're building some products right now that I was really proud of what we did with Brixton.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the ones that are most memorable to me are the ones that we had a hand in the ideation.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of products that we love and they're really cool and that, and then there's a lot of really boring products too. Like we do French fry cartons, for random burger chains, and we do stuff for Chuck E. Cheese, and we do, and it's good because it's good business. But the ones that I would say, we're working on some projects right now with Pelican,
Mm-hmm.
the case company.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really proud of those. And those aren't out yet, but I'm proud of that we had a part to play in that.
Okay, are you talking about? And you can tell me as much as you can tell me. Don't violate any agreements. But are you in the product design and production, or
Yes.
which? Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's got to be fun to be involved from that point of, here's the concept, here's the idea, put it out, build it, however, and then go to a factory and actually produce it and put it out on the market. I think that would be fascinating.
It is, and it's cool because you see it from a sketch.
Yeah.
And then you see it all the way to a consumer. And it's cool when it couples with a brand that has global recognition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are the moments where you think back, like, I was selling hoverboards on the side of the road. We didn't have any money. How are we making products for a global brand? And we don't get, that size of company. It's a special thing to be a part of. And then when you see it, that moment, and for a brand, it's got to be, real magical. I haven't been on that side of it as much, but to be able to go through or be in a neighbor's home. When I moved into our first starter home, I think within the first week, I saw 4 or 5 products just in people's homes that we made.
Mm-hmm.
That's a cool feeling.
Yeah.
It's everything from a book on the table to frames on the wall to the wallet that they, and we don't take any credit for that. We aren't the inventors. We don't deserve the credit. But in the back of my mind, we can say we played a little part in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Frank Chen in the factory. I've played basketball with that guy, and he made that.
Yeah.
His team made that, and I've seen it, and I've seen the people put their heart and soul into this product, and I'm a little part of that, and that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really fun.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great story. I don't know how you can incorporate that into the story of Shyft, but what you were just telling me, I think customers would love to know that. Like that's really a meaningful thing.
No, well, thanks.
And it's the same thing we've talked about home builders. There are home builders who drive around neighborhoods just to look at what they had a little piece in creating. Yeah. And you get to experience that as well. That's awesome. Okay. This is my favorite part of the podcast.
Okay, let's do it.
when we ask three random questions.
Yeah, please.
And I don't know exactly where it's going to go. I guess it's based on how you how you respond. Do you grew up in this area?
Yeah.
In Utah?
Born in Provo, lived in Vineyard.
Okay, and then went to school at
Timpview and then BYU.
Do you call it the BYU?
No.
How do you feel about people who call it the BYU? That's not one of the random questions.
I've never met anyone who calls it that. And I probably wouldn't get to know them very well if they did.
All right. Okay. Since you are a one-town guy, which I knew, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live?
Yeah, that's a hard question. So the theoretical answer is somewhere that it never gets cold because I hate the winter.
Oh,
and I ski and I snowboard, but I'm one of those wusses that gets so cold, and my hands and my feet. Are
your fingers cracking? My fingers crack.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I mean, if like the AC in a building goes to 60 something, I slow down. Like my circulation is bad. And so, and some days I just wonder if I just need to have a higher pain tolerance. But somewhere that it doesn't get warm. So somewhere like, but it would need to be somewhere that was tied into the U.S. economy because I love the U.S. I love other parts of the world, but I just love being here. I love this country.
Always warm. U.S.
Meaning it probably wouldn't be Hawaii because even though that's a part of America, it's not tied into like the infrastructure as easily. It's a little bit too remote for me. So I love to visit, but it probably isn't the best. So for me, it would probably be somewhere in like the deep South.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. I like that.
Yeah.
And the food is great.
Food's great. I love the mossy trees. I love the architecture.
Yeah.
I love the fireflies, the heat, the humidity, the people, the religion. It's a fun place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All of that stuff. Okay. Well, that's a good answer. I'm not a cold fan myself, and so I like to be warm. Is there a heat? Do you mind heat? I
No. Well, you know, it's funny. 3 years ago, I said I could take whatever heat, and now it's like, I know it's dumb to say I'm getting older, but I think it's actually happening. I think I'm actually becoming a lot more sensitive to things that people say.
Well, it
when you get
happens.
older, you care about the heat, and now I'm like, oh, I don't want to be outside watching my kids. It's 90 degrees.
Yeah.
But you know, when you're younger, you're like, let's go play football. Let's go
It
for
doesn't
6
matter.
hours in the 90-degree heat. So
Yeah.
I would take heat. I would sweat over freeze any day, though. That's more of a chameleon or a lizard than a snow lizard.
Yeah.
Whatever's in the snow. A
One
polar
of
bear.
those.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you rather ride the Tour de France
Mm-hmm.
or
Like ride on someone on the back on the pegs, or like or like
I mean,
bike
actually
it,
ride the
cycle it.
bike?
Okay.
Would you rather participate in the Tour de France,
Okay.
pedaling on a bicycle,
Okay.
or ride a bull?
Oh my gosh, Tour de France for sure.
Really?
Yeah.
You-
I've got a lot of family members who are professional rodeo people, and
That's a
intense.
yeah.
I mean, not to say the Tour de France isn't. I probably wouldn't. I might, putter off after the first few hours, but I'd give it a go before
But
I'd
it's-
get on the back of a bull.
But it's unlikely you're gonna break your back getting bucked off your
Yeah, it's
10 speed.
intense, man. That's intense.
Right?
We go up to the Oakley Rodeo.
Oh, we do too. It's the
my
best.
So my in-laws run that or help run it.
Yeah.
Woolston Hume's up there, and they're all real. The dad was a professional
Oh.
bull rider, the son professional steer wrestler, the whole deal.
Yeah.
And so we've seen some pretty gnarly
Yeah.
bulls stomping on the chest. The guy's knocked out.
All
It's bad.
All this stuff. Well, I guess my follow-up is that would you, to that question, based on your answer, is do you prefer wearing Lycra or Western wear? Which do you prefer? Because
That's a good question. Neither outfit really suits me too well, I don't think, but for the benefit of others, I'd probably pick the Western wear just to
Good man.
save people from.
good man. And we've already had our Western showdown moments in this
We have.
show. Okay, one last question. Are you an NFL fan?
Yeah.
This has been going on for so long. I'm kind of sad that I'm still asking this question because
Yeah.
it felt like by now there would be some resolution to this issue.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
Is Taylor Swift going to make Travis Kelce take her last name when they get married?
That is a good question.
Is it going to be
For sure she will.
Travis?
For sure. She's way
Okay.
bigger than he is.
Okay, now you're a product guy.
Well, you know what? They'll probably just they just won't take each other's names. I bet you that's the more likely thing.
I think that we should do this, and you could do this because you're the guy. Can you get some Travis Kelce jerseys made, but they say Swift?
We could, and they'll probably get impounded at customs.
I think we could sell those.
We could.
You have a great story. Those are good answers, by the way.
Thank you.
You have a great story. I'm taking so much of your time about. I think the hovercraft story is amazing, and people or hoverboard, not hovercraft, hoverboard story.
We should have just left it there, and then
No.
he has
What?
hovercraft.
He does hovercraft, and I think most people know the story.
Yeah.
But essentially, you're a product company, you're building hoverboards and you're selling these hoverboards and you're making some money, and it's kind of helping with the company revenue. And then it goes sideways because there's lots of claims and issues, and it sounds like you've just maybe sold off your last one fairly recently. That's after fixing it all up. That's really amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think people understand the story, or maybe know the story if they've know anything about you, and it's a great story. That's the essence of it. But I'm just curious about, because it was this get it done philosophy with regard to the hoverboard for you guys, is that you were faced with this thing and you just had to figure it out. Do you think that is still inherent in the within the company, kind of this get it done attitude?
Yeah, I think so. I think, where we've lacked in capability, I think we've made up for in this instinct to try to just go the distance. And there's a long list of things that I could be critical about in terms of inabilities, but I do think that that's something I am proud of. I learned a lot of that from my parents, my mom, both my parents.
Yeah.
But I got to see my mom, her work ethic still. I mean, she's a machine. She's great. So is my dad. He's almost 70, and he spent 185 days on the road last year for the company. He can do it a lot better than I can, and he's just a few years older. But
they were built different.
Yeah,
those
they're both
guys.
amazing. So
Yeah.
I think for me, that's been a safety net for inability to say, well, what I know I can do is I can just stay on the treadmill. I can do that.
But it's so great. It's such a great message if you can just stay on the treadmill.
I think so. And I think that is the message that I would tell a lot of, entrepreneurs or people who want to be entrepreneurs, is there's kind of this myth that there's this chasm and it's scary and it's big and it's risky. And, it would be silly to say there's no risk. It's silly to say it's not difficult, but life is risky and life is difficult. So you just have to pick which one you want. And so I think we need to do a better job of getting rid of that misconception and just say, if you're willing to stay on the treadmill, you'll get it.
Yeah.
And get it does, for some people, get it means you'll pay your bills.
Sure.
Some people, it means you'll make a $10 billion company.
Yeah.
And most people fall somewhere in between. But there's a lot of richness and opportunity outside of the financial component to starting a company. And so I would say, we call it the killer instinct is what we like to call it. And so when we try to hire someone, say, do they have the killer instinct? Are they a shark in the water when they smell blood?
Yeah.
And that seems maybe a little bit aggressive, but it's this ability that you don't have to tell a shark how to find food. And if you have to tell your employees how to find food, they may be amazing people, but they're not right for that position.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a core management position. So the killer instinct is, can you go the distance? Can you go the distance no matter what?
Yeah.
And I think we have some good people at that.
It's a great message. Okay. Is there a particular book or podcast or philosophy or lesson that you lean on regularly?
Yeah, there are a lot. So one of them is Shoe Dog. Read that every year.
Phil Knight?
Yep, love it. And it kind of romanticizes around his stories because there's a lot of parallels. Now,
Sure.
not the parallel in that we're Nike, but in his experience of going overseas and finding factories and imports and customs and all those kind of stories. So we usually read that every year. Employees got me a Phil Knight signed pair of shoes, and they all wrote in the book when we were a couple of years in. So that's kind of a special one. But
just for a little side gig on that, we did a podcast with the director of global marketing from Nike.
No
here.
way.
Yeah. Kamari Ye is her name. So go check it out.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And
incredible.
She has a story about, does she sit back to back, or her office is above Phil Knight's? It's one of the two.
Wow.
Yeah. Right. Wow. That's
Incredible.
right. And I think that he even bought her an ice cream cone in the Nike cafeteria. One time.
I love when people have those just little
Yes.
nuanced stories of Steve Jobs or Phil Knight or
Yes.
someone. And
Yes.
yeah, those are fun. So I would say that. And as far as advice, I keep a list on my phone. I've probably got a few hundred. I call it principles. That's my to-do list. It's called principles. And so whenever I have a moment of enlightenment where I think I just experienced like a truth,
Yeah.
an if then about life or about business, I write them down. And so I have those, and I I hope one day I can have done enough things that I could, inspire someone by telling the story. And I'm early on in that, but my goal is when you have these moments, you write them down. So I think the one that I'll share today is, or as many, but the one that I think stands out to me is, the secret to all of this isn't really about if you succeed or if you fail or how you define that or this. The secret, I think, is being able to have your cup full regardless. And that sounds like a really cheesy aphorism, and it is, but it's really powerful, and it's helped me a lot because you're going to have days that you're up and you're going to have days that you're down, period.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone does.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the people that inspire you in your life, they're usually the people that are full regardless.
Yeah, and sometimes you think
it's a secret.
It is a secret because you look at those guys sometimes and you're like, how do they do that?
Yeah.
How do they do that?
And
I wish I could do that.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, and it probably takes a lifetime or, to unlock that. But if you can find a way to be just as content. Now, you're going to have sorrow, but if to be full and to feel gratitude and happiness about where you're at when you're down is when you're high, then you just won everything.
Yeah.
You won in every measure of success that the world measures and beyond. And so I think that's what my aim is, to one day become that man and to be able to truly say I can feel that way and do that. And and if I can, then I think that'll be a winner. I think that will be worth whatever it takes to become that guy.
That is a win. I love that, but I also love that you recognize moments and that you make a note. I do that sometimes. I don't do it often enough because I think you could, on a daily basis, you could find something to write down and reflect on. So that's a great story. I want to leave it with this because I heard you talk about this once before, but I would say a key to your success is your mindset and the way that you talked about it a little bit early on in managing obstacles and challenges. Your mindset is interesting to me. And so where did you develop that? Like this philosophy of, hey, we're going to get through this. We're going to be here tomorrow. We're going to figure out how to make it work. Because a lot of us feel like the world's collapsing, the sky is falling. I'm never going to get out of this. And it seems like you have been able to develop a different way to manage those crises.
I appreciate that. I don't know exactly where that comes from. I think a lot of it comes from just the process of repeated exposure to challenges. And I'd say that's one thing I'm grateful for in entrepreneurship is that it's been all-consuming. You never rest. You never feel comfortable. You just can't. No matter how well things are going, there's always a new curveball, and what you have two options. And I think at some point it clicked to me in the journey of entrepreneurship is that, listen, life isn't going to get easier. Whether I'm an entrepreneur or not, it's just not. That's not how life was designed. And so I have to somehow figure out a way to remain positive and hopeful. And I'm not always that way. I have bad days, of course, but I have seen a tremendous growth in that area. And the problems, it's funny because the BYU games and stuff lately have been, I'm a big fan. My wife is like, this is weird to me because when you have a multi-million-dollar crisis, you're calm. And when BYU's losing, you're screaming at the TV and throwing something across the room. And it's like, I don't know why that is, but I do go to a really quiet place.
Yeah.
When big crisis happens, I go to a really calm. I get calmer than I normally am. And it's just like a calmness. And I think it's a survival mechanism, of just like, okay, we got two options. You're either going to make the best of this or you're just going to go the other way. And I'm trying to be more always deliberate about that. And so I don't know that there's any secret sauce or that I'm exceptional at it, but I would say that if you're grounded and you another one of the lists that I've made in my phone is the filters of life that I see through. And so, for example, when I connect something that matters to me and that should be placed in a hierarchy of decisioning, I'll write it down. So for example, I care more about being able to call the shots than making money. I don't know why that is. It's not a power thing. Well, maybe it is. Maybe some of it is a power, but it's a freedom thing. I care more that I'm in control of what decisions are made in my day than about how much money I make. And so I write that principle down, because the next time I'm faced with an opportunity, and then another one is if I care more about the work's impact than about, another one related to money than the money. Now, that doesn't mean I'm a good Samaritan and I just want to do good, but I found through trial that I actually am not very excited about something that only fills the financial cup. And I think a lot of us are that way.
Yeah.
So I write these principles down, and I think those filters have helped me. And one of the filters is kind of some of the filters are around this concept of, it's not about the problem. It's not about what's going wrong. It's like the happiness is in trying to fill your cup. Have you seen the movie About Time?
Once Upon a Time, yes.
It's the most amazing movie.
Well, now I feel like I have to rewatch it.
It's one of the best movies ever made. And then the last thing I'll say before, this is a very run-on sentence, but that movie, the whole point of it, and he says it at the end, is, he has the ability to time travel.
Yeah.
He goes back and relives moments. He tries to autocorrect. And then he said, the secret that I found out eventually is that I lived every day as if I had deliberately come back to live this day of my ordinary life. And so it's just this, whoa, like, that's it. And so I think I'm trying to gravitate toward that. And that's the long answer to your question of, my wife and I talk a lot about that movie, because it's, if you imagine that you woke up in bed this morning and you chose to come back in time to live it, you would see the little beauties. You would see the bad moments. Yeah. You would know they were going to be fine. And they're going to be fine already, because everyone's fine. We all make it through. Yeah. So it's just little anecdotes that help. But I'm probably perceived to be better at it than I am, for sure. But well, that's kind of you to say.
Good perception to have. I think that's a great place to finish. Live every day like you purposefully came back to live that day. Like, I think that's an amazing philosophy. If we could all do that,
that'd be amazing.
Wouldn't we be better off?
That would be amazing.
Alex Burdge, Shyft Global, man, it's been so great catching up with you.
Absolutely.
We need to do it again. There's going to be another inflection point at Shyft. When that happens, just call me and let's come back in and let's talk about it. Okay?
You got it. Thanks for having me.
It's been great visiting with you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Know Your Ship podcast presented by eHub. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.